For a squatter with little to no policy accomplishments under his belt, Afghanistan had come to look something like a bright spot. Um, his nuclear talks with North Korea have proved fruitless. His maximum pressure campaign against Iran has produced no concessions from Tehran. Palestinians declared his Middle East peace plan dead on arrival, and a trade deal with China looks more unlikely every day. But while 45 has not achieved his goal of a full U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, he has drawn down thousands of U.S. troops and struck a deal with the Taliban intended to pave the way for a complete exit and an end to a 19-year conflict. Now, the uproar over U.S. intelligence showing that Russia paid bounties for the killings of U.S. troops in Afghanistan is renewing focus on a conflict that had drifted into the political backburner and turning what had been a qualified success story for the squatter into at least a short-term political disaster. What remains to be seen is whether and how the episode might affect 45's future plans. The military recently finished drawing down troops in Afghanistan from about 14,000 last fall to roughly 8,600 now. That is the minimum level that military commanders say allows them to prevent the Taliban and other radical fighters from overrunning the shaky U.S.-backed Afghan government in Kabul. But with the November election coming up, military officials say that they are braced for 45 to announce at any time his intention to pull thousands more troops from the country before then. One person familiar with the squatter stinking said that he had repeatedly spoken of having all U.S. soldiers out of the country by the end of the year. The prospect may become even more likely now that the United States' continuing presence in Afghanistan has badly stung a squatter who lost patience with the U.S. mission there long ago. Before years has found himself pressured to stay by congressional and military leaders invoking the sector of another attack in the mold of 9/11. The debate over what 45 officials do about the intelligence on Russian bounties and when is ignoring the bigger picture here. Said Dan Caldwell, who's a senior advisor of the Concerned Veterans for America, a conservative group that opposes the U.S. troop deployments overseas. He says the bigger problem is that by leaving our troops not only in places like Afghanistan but also in Iraq and Syria, we make it easier for adversaries like Russia, Iran, and non-state actors like Al-Qaeda to bleed us on the cheap. 45 has called stories about the bounties a made-up fake news media hoax, which it isn't, and studiously avoided commenting on the substance of the intelligence, including how it could change his policies toward either Russia or Afghanistan. But however willing he may be to overlook or downplay Russian aggression worldwide as he seeks to thaw out the relations with Moscow, it seems likely that the political grief he has suffered will only fuel his desire to withdraw troops from the country. 45's patience with the conflict has been steadily waning in recent months, and he was particularly angry after 2 U.S. soldiers were killed when a member of Afghanistan security forces opened fire on U.S. troops during a joint patrol in early February. Days later, 45, who has often remarked on the burden of writing military condolence letters, traveled to Dover Air Force Base to witness the return of those soldiers' remains, a somber nighttime ceremony that was chillingly punctured by a widow's departure screams. The recently published book by 45's former National Security Advisor John Bolton confirms what has become increasingly obvious. Bolton recounts numerous instances when 45 making use of expletives asked his exasperated advisors when he could be finished with the country. We've got to get out of there, Bolton recalls 45 saying in March of 2019. 45 took a key step in that direction February 29th when Secretary of State Mike Domas Pompeo and the Taliban leader had signed an agreement in Qatar under which the U.S. would begin a phased troop withdrawal in exchange for a halt in Taliban attacks on U.S. forces and the beginning of political talks about the insurgent group and the Afghanistan government. The signing came just days after officials say intelligence about the Russian bounties appeared in 45's daily intelligence briefing. Some 45 officials were concerned about the intelligence and that they believed it could jeopardize the Taliban deal. Whether for that reason or others, officials say 45 was not verbally briefed about it at that time. That agreement has been plagued with setbacks, including an unwelcome increase in Taliban attacks on Afghan targets, an exchange of prisoners between the Taliban and the Afghan government that has taken months longer than expected, and an Afghan election with disputed results paralyzed that country's government. In one sign that 45 is determined to press ahead, Dumbass Pompeo spoke up about the video conference Monday with the Taliban's deputy and chief negotiator, which is Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar. I don't know if I'm saying that name right, but that's what it looks like. To discuss implementation of the U.S. Taliban agreement, according to a State Department spokesperson. The secretary made clear that the expectation for the Taliban to live up to their commitments, which include not attacking Americans, added the spokesperson Morgan Ortagus. There is no indication that the U.S. intelligence has tied the Russian bounties to any attacks on America since the agreement was signed, or that the Taliban senior leadership was ever aware of them. All the while, however, the U.S. troops have been on their way out, and while Afghanistan continues to suffer horrific attacks like a May assault on a maternity ward in Kabul, there is a little evidence that American voters whose support for the war has long been waning feel any less safe. Certainly, there is a political resonance for the notion that after all these years, 45 will end the war that other squatters are unwilling to end, said Richard Fontaine, a chief executive officer of the Center for a New American Security, a Washington-based policy group. Fontaine cautions against a withdrawal of troops reminiscent of the U.S. exit from Iraq in 2011, and that could allow militants to rampage and terrorists to find what they call a safe haven in as Al-Qaeda did in Afghanistan before the 9/11 attacks. For now, that view has significant support in Congress. On Wednesday, the House Armed Service Committee voted 45 to 11 to approve a bipartisan amendment to an annual defense authorization bill that would restrict funds for withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan below the level of 8,000. One of the amendment's co-sponsors, Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming, the third-ranking House Republican, warned in a statement that the U.S. Taliban deal allows for the troop withdrawal that is not conditions-based. A Senate effort from the opposite perspective met a swift rebuke the same day. Hold on a second. I love coffee I love the smell of coffee in the morning. Okay, let's get back. Senate effort from the opposite perspective met a swift rebuke the same day. Senator Rand Paul, another fucking moron, who's a Republican from Kentucky, and one of the Congress's leading non-interventionist voices, co-sponsored an amendment with the Senator Tom Udall, who's a Democrat from New Mexico, to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan within a year. The Senate had voted 60 to 33 on that amendment. But yeah.